So Commissioner, I'll leave it up to you if you want to start or if you want to wait a few minutes. I just pinged Ethan as well via email, so we'll see if that helps.
Well, while we're gearing up, I'll share. Told a couple of committee members at the end of the last meeting that I wasn't sure if I would be able to pull this committee assignment again for 2025. There was interest from other commissioners in being, on sitting on this committee for the Board of Commissioners. But when the dust settled a couple weeks ago, like I was able to retain this committee. So I'm glad to be here with you for another year.
Good.
And Ethan just texted saying he's in the wait. Oh, he's in Teams in the waiting room. Shoot.
Oh.
One of the invites, it's a tricky thing with my Outlook. One of the invites, when I added an update, the Microsoft Teams generated, and I was trying to remove all of them. And it must have gone through when Ethan had me send him the invitation directly.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, when you set up those calendar items in Outlook, it always wants to tack on a
and
Teams
you have to
link.
yes, manually uncheck it. And Ethan just asked on Sunday night if I could resend him the invite. So I think I just forwarded it, and it probably just. Oh, he's having some issues too. Well, everyone should be happy to know that the people struggling the most are the two youngest members of the committee. So, okay, Ethan should be joining very shortly. And then I don't know if Johnny's troubleshooting is going to work. Hopefully it will. I think the worst case scenario, I could have him call my desk phone and I could put him on speaker. Thank you all for bearing with us.
No.
No problem.
When all is said and done, these 5 or 10 minutes are a pain in the butt. But when all is said and done, I'm sure it will end up saving us time over everybody driving into Bend.
True.
Especially right now, the Olney Avenue is closed down. It is a nightmare by the county building.
I just came down. I left 45 minutes early because I was working from home this afternoon. I was like, I knew what I was in for, but it's just always very frustrating when you're sitting in it.
And that's till June. Oops.
Oh, there's Johnny. Okay, we got Johnny.
Oh, yay.
All right, Johnny, we can see you or hear you or see that you're joined. Can you hear us? Might take a minute on them.
Oh, connecting audio.
And then Ethan's Zoom was just updating, so I think that's just a matter of hopefully a short bit. All right, Johnny, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hey,
Hey,
Johnny.
there you are.
That took some doing, sorry.
Okay, Ethan's also in the process of updating his Zoom, so Commissioner, I'll keep it in your court if you want to start or give it another minute.
Um,
Oh, here he is.
Great.
Are any of the ranchers online?
We have Ryan
Yes.
Kingsbury joining us. Hey, Ethan.
Hey, I think I'm on. Oh, I'm on mute. Hang on.
I'm sorry you got the Teams invite. I was trying to not have those go out, the
No
Microsoft.
worries. Thanks. We
They-
figured it out. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
It's great to have you all here. Thank you so much for carving time out for this supplemental meeting. I'm kind of guessing that for as long as this committee continues, we might be starting to see kind of like the annual rhythm of it. You know, there'll be kind of a flurry of activity in, November, December, January, February, before the applications are in, and then maybe we can kind of back it down in terms of frequency, the rest of the year. But thanks for coming less than a month after our last meeting, so that we can put together the information we need to put together to get an application in from the Deschutes County Wolf Livestock Depredation Compensation and Financial Assistance Committee to the state. And actually, I'm just remembering, I probably haven't called the meeting to order yet. So this is our February 11th, 2025 meeting of said committee. And I think we can go ahead and jump right in with some round of introductions, and then on to our business for the night. Since you all appear in different orders on each other's screens, let me just put out an order, and maybe people get to introduce themselves in that order. Could we have Donna, Gordon, Ryan, Stephen, Ethan, Johnny, David, and then Mr. Dugan? Oh, and of course, Jet, introduce themselves.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Donna Harris, wolf advocate on our coexistence advocate on our committee.
I'm Gordon Jones. I am representing one of the business positions. I own Lake Creek Lodge, a small resort in Camp Sherman.
Ryan, would you?
Ryan Kingsbury, producer from Brothers. Just here to eavesdrop, I guess.
Well, we might want to ask you about your application.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us. Stephen?
Stephen Papa, large animal veterinarian in Deschutes County.
I think I'm next.
Yep.
Am I? Yep. I'm trying to remember the order. Hi, I'm Ethan O'Brien. I'm from North 44 Farm. I'm a producer and yeah, represent farmers and ranchers on this committee.
Downey, I saw you blink out. Are you back?
Back. Oops, are you there?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. John Leeson, just a livestock producer on the committee, and
Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, David Andrews, the non-lethal wolf conflict prevention specialist for USDA Wildlife Services.
David?
Good evening, Scott Dugan, OSU Extension Livestock Agent.
Hi, Scott. All right.
Steve Administrative Manager for Deschutes County and your staff support for this meeting.
Thanks, Jen. All right. Well, our first item on the agenda is the minutes from our January meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Did people have a chance to review them?
Yes.
I move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? The motion passes. Thanks. All right, so now to the main event for the day, discussion of our potential grant applications and pieces of our application. Jen, maybe you could walk us through kind of the what information we're trying to assemble today, what decisions we need to make, and what pieces we're going to be considering.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to start off with an update, maybe a bit of a somber update, and maybe David can add to this as well. I just got off the phone with Ellie Gage. We've been playing phone tag for a week. So we've been trying to coordinate a little bit because what we discussed in our last meeting was potentially working with Cook County on some non-preventive measure funds, specifically maybe the trailer. So she had her meeting last week and we were kind of playing phone tag from that. What the update that LA received this morning is that, and David, I'm assuming you know this information, is that US or Wildlife Services was notified that all of their positions are a yearly contract and that none of the contracts are going to be renewed. So I think David might have the longest contract since it was November or December when you came on board. But clearly that's some really heavy, hard news and going to be super impactful on the non-preventative. I think all of the work for wolves and, far reaching beyond just the wolf population here. So where Ellie and I left it, because we didn't have very much time, was I was going to deliver that information to you guys as part of your consideration. We don't have any further information or confirmation thereof. I don't know if David has anything to speak to that, but kind of where Ellie and I left, where we may leave it as we all know, the grants that we apply, I should say, there's one other thing to consider is right now, we think the pool of funding to work from is about $700,000. We know $175,000 that is federal grant funds. If those funds haven't already been transferred to Oregon, we don't expect those funds to be transferred to Oregon. Just with the way a lot of other grant notifications, I've been receiving some official notifications on other grants. So it would be surprising at this time if those funds weren't transferred already, that they would be transferred. So that might greatly reduce the pool there. We don't know that yet. I haven't connected with Sunny. It's possible that those funds were transferred at the beginning of the year or last year or the year before as we work on a 2-year kind of budget cycle. So just as a caveat there could be a lot less funds to pull from statewide, but we don't know that yet. Potentially going forward, I would think that that's gonna be the impact for future funding, but we don't know if that's also gonna impact the immediate funding. So what Ellie and I decided, or thought, that maybe a wise strategy to go forward is the committee does their business here, which is we have technically, since you approved the minutes, we have technically approved the funds that the county wants to apply for. This meeting was specifically to look at the 3 applications that we receive from producers who are looking for non-lethal preventative measure funding as well. So we are gonna take a look at those 3 applications that we can walk through. And then the process here is once the committee makes a recommendation of what funds to apply for, I will then take it before the Board of Commissioners. Historically, in the past, the Board of Commissioners took the recommendation of the Wolf Committee. But that is again up to their decision at every Wolf Committee meeting. Once we have guidance from a majority of the board to apply for the Wolf grant funds, I will go ahead and submit the applications. When we expect to get notified at the very end of March or beginning of April of how much funds we have. We are not obligated when we get those funds to use them exactly what we applied for. So the committee will come back at that time, once we know what pool of funds we have to work with, on how they want those funds to be distributed out. What Ellie and I were talking about is potentially maybe our next meeting, once we know what the grant funds is for, is a meeting, if people are interested, with Crook County and Deschutes County together and seeing if we want to leverage the funding that we have together. I believe all 3 of the applications we have here has land in both Deschutes County and Crook County. For sure 2, I believe the 3rd one does as well. I'm not 100% positive on that. So there's going to be overlap in the grant applications. But we also have overlap in our services, right? Or we have coordination in our services with David working in Crook County and Deschutes County. So since the landscape is changing, maybe drastically, maybe now is the natural time for these 2 counties to start working together on their funds and seeing if we can leverage the pool of funds we have together moving forward. So put that all out there. We don't need to decide all of that today. What we absolutely need to decide for is what grants we want to apply for, and then I'll move forward with those applications. So I'll pause there. I don't know if we want to, if David has any additional information or background to share on the wildlife services bit that I did. And David, I just want to say I'm sorry. You know, that was gut-wrenching news to hear that. So I'm sure like it's way more gut-wrenching for you who was, you know, impacted. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just really quick, I don't have a ton to add. I was in a meeting earlier today with the assistant state supervisor for wildlife services. And it sounds like, yeah, they want to not go forward with term contracts, but that's not set in stone and everything's still up in the air right now. So we're waiting for direction to come through to see if they are going to continue to do that, or if it's just part of the hiring freeze right now, where people that have their contracts ending in the next couple months, they'll be affected because they're not able to get hired back currently with the hiring freeze. But yeah, things are up in the air right now, and we'll see what happens when it gets closer to my time ending in November. Like you said, that's a little ways off. So a lot could change, and I'm hopeful, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Sorry, Dave. Sorry to hear about all this uncertainty, David. And yeah, hopefully in a couple of months when the administration has accomplished some of what it wants to accomplish, we can make sure that federal funding for all of the important things that federal funding accomplishes starts to move a little bit more normally again. Okay. Jen, before we jump in, one thing I wanted to ask about was based on the recent discussions, it seems like we're not trying to kind of ratchet down or shrink what we request. That, you know, the state contact said, you know, ask for what you really need so that we can get a complete sense of what the need is out in the state. Is that right?
That is the guidance I got from Sunny. Brian Kingsbury, who's on, who has one of the applications in from McCormick Ranch. Ryan and I had a long conversation about this as well. I think the Kingsburys were, I don't want to speak for you, Ryan, but just to paraphrase, we're kind of deciding, do we go more targeted or should we go broad? And I think they ended up going broad in their ask. I can let Ryan talk further about that, specifically because of that guidance from Sunny, because one of the questions I had originally for her before we met in January was, knowing that the pool of funds is limited and the need is great, should we be considerate of our neighbors like in Eastern Oregon or in Klamath County who are getting greatly impacted? And Sunny's like, you should ask for what the real need is on the ground in Deschutes County, because the legislature is deciding what they're going to fund for the next 2 years right now, right? The legislature is in session now, for those who may not follow this. They're in session now through June, where they're figuring out, their big budget, which is also going to include funding this program. The funding that they currently has was from the last biennium legislature. So this is the pool of funding they have now in there is the end pool of funding, and Sunny's going to spend it down to the penny. It's a very calculated way of doing it. And so the legislature will be looking, they will have access to what kind of the need and the requests were from these grant applications when they're determining the budget for the next 2 years on this. So I think, reading the tea leaves from my conversation with Sunny was like, don't over ask, like ask for what you need, ask for what's going to be helpful, ask for what preventative measures, are going to be impactful in your county. But don't curtail your ask based on the limited pool.
Okay. So we could advance the requests from our 3 producers and the committee's kind of, educational outreach, the committee had a bunch of ideas for preventative measures. We could advance all of those things in our application and not worry about the number, because that is the need that we've identified in this region.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, we're not limited in what we ask for. And typically speaking, I don't know, she has a lot to juggle with, but typically speaking, she has a straight up ratio across the board. Fully funding depredations. Last year, she partially funded missing, and that happens some years, doesn't happen some years. We don't have any missing applications. Then all other preventative measure grant requests were funded at a certain percentage. She had a ratio, I believe, for the counties, like the Eastern Oregon counties, who've just been historically been really impacted year on year and had a higher ratio than summer counties like Deschutes County or Crook County, who haven't had a massive ramp up of activity or particularly depredation, I would say. So I think that ratio was like 60% for these counties that are just feeling the impact year on year end, and then all the other counties got funded at 40%. Don't quote me on that, but that it's somewhere around there is kind of how she did it. But like, it wasn't a county by county ask or a request by request ask. It was, here's the pool of funding. Now, if she has she doesn't have like a directive on how she does it. So historically though, that is what she does and what she indicated she was going to look to do for funding for this coming request.
Okay, so our job is to ask for what we need so that the state understands what the real need is in our region, and then to expect some ratio of that to actually come through.
That is my understanding from my conversation. Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions about kind of what parameters we need to be working within as we're considering applications right now?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused, and maybe somebody can help me out. If these ranches are all 3 are partially in Crook County and Deschutes County, our funds have to be used within Deschutes County, isn't that correct?
That's a good question. So typically, yes. I think that both Ellie and I would like further clarification from Sunny on combining resources. Specifically, originally what Ellie and I were talking about was the trailer, the carcass removal trailer, because we were kind of looking to go half and half in there for that, because that will be shared around. But I think we could do it for a bigger conversation as well on if funding directly to ranchers or producers who share that. But typically speaking, the funds are supposed to be spent in the county. Now, I think, again, it's been early conversations in this bigger group with ODA about kind of joining forces. And it was one of my takeaways from the last meeting is to touch base with Sunny over the coming months and figure out kind of what that looks like. And I think Ellie and I are going to do that together. So I don't have a solid answer for you, yes, but I would say typically speaking, the funds are meant to be spent within the county. For sure, the depredation has to happen within the county. But as we all know, you know, like our last producer that we funded was across 2 counties and 1 reservation land, I believe. And his preventative measures were used for all of his land, right? He doesn't just carve out the preventative, like his preventative measures are herd wide and they travel. So what I would say, but I've said it repeatedly about this grant, is that it has a lot of room for leeway, knowing that there's not strong borders for these ranches, and knowing a lot that, particularly in some other places, like our paperwork that we ask, I know for Ellie, all she asked them is to send her an email with a listed things that they want to ask for. They don't even have to fill out the grant application. So we have one of the more stringent grant applications. It's a pretty loose program, knowing that most people aren't strong on the paperwork, but they need some resources available. So
Yeah.
a long-winded answer, but hopefully it gives you a sense of where we're.
Well, as just a slight follow-up on that, could I find out from these 3 ranchers how much acreage they have within Deschutes County to see? I mean, I don't know if they have 5 acres out of their 130,000 in Deschutes County, and if that amount that they're asking for should be ratioed percentage-wise according to how many, you know, if they have a few acres.
The other 2 were invited, but they're not required to be here. And that wasn't a specific question that we've asked in our application of anyone of how large their ranch size was. So, well,
if Deschutes County and Crook County is giving them so much and we are, is there an overlap then? I mean, it gets a little like where we were sort of new this first year and didn't really maybe realize that the prior rancher A had 3 counties. And if they start getting their wolf committees there, then we're sort of duplicating things, like it seems.
You know, I agree with Donna. I think these applications are woefully incomplete. We need maps, we need, acreage, we need a better description of what they're asking for. If they've got a match that they've applied for, how much is that match? I think these ranchers need to do a better job of filling out their application, because we have to be responsible for spending this money. And I'm not going to be as willing, I think, to approve these applications without better applications.
Well, I mean, it's important to remember that these folks have provided the information that the application requested, right? So I mean, you can be frustrated with the application form, but the folks who have submitted applications have provided all the information that they were asked for.
Well, but our task is to provide sufficient evidence of actual livestock and or working dog losses attributed to wolf depredation, whereas there is no evidence of any depredations on any of these 3 applications, obviously. So if they're asking for preventive measures, it seems to me that they could do a far better job of explaining what they're looking for and why and where.
I do
I think
think
that's just
that,
common sense.
yeah, I mean, we want to do our due diligence, and um, in writing is one way to do that, and also through our discussions and our analysis that we do as a committee is another way to do that. I mean, we all asked, Aaron Bott, point blank, like, tell us about what this situation is in the South Maoris and in this Brothers area. And he tried to give us kind of like a detailed understanding of that. There is known wolf activity. There have been depredations in South Crook County. And this area is the area in question seems to be some kind of like super highway migration corridor for wolves, in and out of Eastern Oregon. So that's we have had the opportunity to gather some information uh, during our meetings up to this point, and we have the opportunity to collect some more information today. And I did see Ryan put his hand up. I think maybe he wants to add to what we know. Ryan, please feel free to speak.
Okay, yeah, no, I was just gonna mention that like when we were going through our grant application, we took this into consideration too, and for our operation, we're pretty 50-50 being right on the line. And so we kind of just cut, like some of the asks was tools basically. Like I was asking for a drone. So we just did 50% Deschutes, 50% Crook. And we're splitting it that way in real. I mean, you got to think about it. A wolf doesn't pay taxes. He doesn't know where a county line is. So I can't say it's going to be 60-40 or 70-30. But, acres wise, we're probably somewhat pretty close, just guessing off the top of my head that we are 50-50. Probably not quite exact, but I can't guarantee you I'm going to spend 50% of my time one side of the line or the other. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's the best we could come up with. That made sense in our minds was just a 50-50 split because it's going to be used in 2 counties. So 50-50.
And which ranch is that?
McCormick Ranch.
McCormick. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And where's your kind of home base, right?
As far as county, where
Yeah.
all the houses are in Crook County.
Okay.
But, for example, Becky Hatfield Hyde, I know she has thousands of acres
Mhm.
on the Deschutes County side of the county line. I don't know exactly how many thousands, and I don't know what ratio that is to the total Hatfield holdings, but it's not 5 acres. I mean, and I don't know, right, Ryan, if you have any feel for that, the other 2
Yeah.
applicants, there's a significant amount, or is it a little bit of their holdings?
Yeah. So Hatfields are our fence line neighbor. I can see their house from my house type of deal. So, and I don't want to speak for them on acres because I really don't know, but we operate on probably a little over 100,000 acres. And like I said, you could almost say it's somewhere at least 60-40 one way or the other. So just round number, easy math, 50-50. So I don't know what that does for you as far as what you're asking, but close to 50,000 acres in Deschutes County that we operate on. And I know Hatfields are, they're up there too. They got a lot of ground out there by Brothers. That's on the Deschutes line. So
Yeah.
And that's including your allotments, right? The 50
Yeah,
cow. Yeah.
that's counting BLM and forest and everything was about 100,000 or a little over.
Ryan, since your biggest ask was for range riders, how many hours a day and for how many days are you seasonally going to be using them? To be for $30,000. I'm just curious. How are you hiring a range rider? At
So,
what?
so my math for that, we're trying to decide if an actual extra range rider will benefit our operation versus just us putting in the extra hours. We're still gonna have to decide that. But the math I came up with that was I wrote down 1 extra hour per day came out to roughly $18,000, and that's just for one person. Currently, there's about 6 of us on the ranch that operate the ranch. So it seems pretty realistic that a couple of us put in 1 extra hour a day. I mean, honestly, I just did a quick number too, and if all 6 of us did 1 hour a day, it comes out to $108,000.
And is that riding just certain hours a day, like dawn and dusk, or is that all day?
Well, that's not necessarily a specific in mind, and not necessarily just 1 hour a day. Honestly, what I've been doing, because I'm kind of keeping track of what I'm doing, if it is like, oh, I see a wolf track and I go investigate, I'll write down how many dedicated wolf hours I have done. And I started this since we started getting impacted in November, so I have a kind of rough idea. But I mean, one day last December, no, it was like November, I think, if I remember correctly, we were weaning calves. I spent 4 hours running around on a 4-wheeler because we had that collared 158 running around on the hillside, and he pinged a couple 100 yards away from our pasture. So I just took an easy number of 1 extra hour. On average, I think that's undercutting the extra effort that's going to be put in, honestly. And like I said, that was for one person was 18,000, so we kind of just doubled that. For 2 people.
That's
But
one
yeah.
extra hour a day for 2 people at what pay rate?
Just put down like $50 an hour, and that's for a year.
Okay, just as an example, not, just to play the devil's advocate a little bit. There's a guy that does this for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'll correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that guy charge $25 an hour? And he'll come out and trailer his horse and.
I'm not sure about that one, but what we gave Rancher A last year was figured at $25 an hour, and they were going to just use them for 4 hours a day, along with their own outfits that they had. This was a hired range rider at $25 an hour for 200 days. And that was Rancher A last year.
And that was seasonal too, right? It wasn't.
Yeah, 200 days a year, because I'm assuming that most cow-calf operations have their calves brought in a pen or a calving area in the winter where they're bunched closer and watched. I mean, my exes had that. They had cows penned up and the calves, and they were closed in. So I don't know if these ranches have that. I don't know. Or are they calving out on the range?
Our specific operation calves out on the range. We're not due to officially start until about March, but we've got some dropping on the ground now already. We're a little bit unique, and so are Hatfields. We're part of CMB, and we retain ownership of our calves as yearlings too. So we have a whole feedlot full of a lot of yearling calves, and we're starting to calve again. So we don't really ever have a downtime. We also have spring herd and fall herd calves. So we kind of just never stop. And honestly, realistically, if we're actually gonna look into hiring a range rider, we don't just have one cow herd. We probably have at least 7 different herds at one time that need to be looked over. So if you want to go on that $25 an hour, that's fine. You know, cut that number in half, but then I'm gonna have to multiply that by 7 if you want to get down to the nitty gritty.
So you're envisioning basically using existing staff to do some of the range riding you need as opposed to hiring a whole nother person. And existing staff, you've put in existing staff rates.
That's more or less as of right now to start, yeah. And if we actually wanted to hire outside range riders to help in the future, we'll have to kind of reevaluate. But right now, we just kind of came up with kind of a general number that could be kind of used as a labor, an extra wolf labor. And to be honest, to be perfectly honest, that's a low number.
And one other thing, Ryan said CNB. So for anyone who's not familiar with that, that's Oregon Country Natural Beef. The McCormicks and the Hatfields were sort of like the two of the founding ranches of Oregon Country Natural Beef. So just so everyone knows what that was a reference to.
Thank you.
So Ryan, while I've still got you here, I think it is helpful to the community to kind of learn more about your operation, because it is not standard from the sounds of things at all. So so yeah, when you're saying you're running like 7 herds, 7 bands, whatever, how many head would be in a band, just roughly, obviously?
It definitely depends. Right now, I probably got one group that's roughly 500 head of cows, and they're spring cows, and then another herd of spring cows is roughly 200 head, and then another herd, so group 3, there's about another 200 head. We have about 1,400 or so total.
Yeah. And you're rotating them around areas all the time. They're never
They're
stationary.
constantly
Really.
moving. Yep. They're constantly doing kind of a big circle more or less throughout the ranch. And then we also have a little piece lease ground just outside of Prineville, and a bunch of the fall cows go over that way. And so that's another thing that we're trying to figure out too, is that's a very understaffed or kind of an ignored herd, if you will, because we're not there daily like we are here. So I mean, you could hire somebody full time to just go hang out with those cows if it gets bad enough wolf wise, Right now, I feel like it's kind of one of those deals. It's a whole new world to all of us. We got hit pretty hard this winter from November to New Year's. But since New Year's on, I haven't really seen a sign of a wolf. So it's going to be hard to tell. Are they here now? Were they just passing through? What their frequency is going to be? Because kind of like how Aaron described on the last meeting, we're just kind of a corridor right now. We're getting hit by the rogue wanderers, not necessarily established pack. So it's hard to predict anything at this point, but
When you're moving them around, are these, is your property all fenced? If it's allotments, a lot of it is not fenced. Am I correct?
it's all fenced. A lot of our BLM allotments are 3,000 to 4,000 acres. But yeah, we were just through our CMB program. They're making us do an exercise. We already do our own grazing rotation system, our own planning, but it's interesting through CMB, they're making us use this kind of Excel program. And part of that, we're listing out all the pastures and the acres and all that type of goodness. And we're going to be close to 100 different pastures, varying sizes, but
And will that require you to have more people in place? Are you doing this by horseback or by ATVs for the most part?
both actually. We use Honda dirt bikes quite a bit because they're faster, and with our skeleton crew, You can get around a lot more, but horseback as well. Yeah.
Mhm. So you're in a process of sort of transitioning in your methodology on how you're ranching, and you're learning different techniques, and sounds like also learning to coexist with wolves. That's part of it. And have you tried your Fladry and the fox lights at all?
Yes, we're currently playing around with fox lights a little bit, especially when the wolves were around. That's kind of a learning curve too. Um, you talk to Aaron Bot, and he says you don't necessarily want to just leave them up. So you kind of got to know when their wolves are kind of in the area, and you want to keep moving them around. So those are very labor intensive, and luckily currently we have David, and he's been helping out a lot with the fox lights. We did a little bit of Fladry, and we might again. There's only a couple of places that it makes sense to use Fladry, because I don't think it makes sense to Fladry a 5,000 acre pasture. You're talking about, roughly 10 miles of fence line around one pasture, so that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. But yes, we used some Fladry down. My brother-in-law calves out replacement heifers. Since it's their very first calf, they need extra care and watch. And around the calving lot down there last year, we put Fladry up, or Aaron Bot came out. ODF and W put it up for us, and then but it made sense to use it down there.
Thank you.
Ryan, another question on your request for drones.
Mhm.
Do you have anybody special, as I understand, where they're using it in the Klamath County area for the road pack, that especially educated people, technicians have to be used. And if they can't be used near forested areas because at night you can't see the trees, and they
Mhm.
crash drones that way. So how are you planning to use drones? Do you have somebody that's already trained? Or do you have forested areas?
Well, I'll probably be flying it myself. We've been using drones for a few years, just kind of self-trained, I guess, not, uh, and honestly, most of that drone, it's going to be super easy out on the Deschutes side because it's open landscape, just high desert out there. We do run in the forest, and it's probably not going to be used a whole lot up in that country, but specifically my biggest advantage, I think, for a drone is, like I said, we're starting to kind of our main calving window is coming up, and we do calve out on the range in those bigger 3,000, 5,000 acre pastures. And it's just not practical to ride the whole thing daily. So I see a big benefit and big use for the thermal drone in that aspect. Also, when we start weaning, so thinking about the wolf, when they came around, we were weaning last year, and I decided right then and there it makes the biggest sense to make your biggest human presence preventative measures during weaning and calving.
Mhm.
Because when you're weaning, you got a whole bunch of distress noises out there. You got 500 head of calves bawling their heads off for a few days until they get over getting pulled off their mama. So that's a big draw, big attractant. And then same as calving, you have a lot of smells out there on the desert. There's afterbirth involved. And I mean, I already have a lot of issues with coyotes out there. So it's easy to say that a wolf will come sniffing around at some sooner or later. So those are my biggest two pushes as far as like going back to the hourly deal. I don't necessarily expect to put in an extra hour every single day, but when we start calving a lot heavier, I plan on being out a lot more often with that drone and my four-wheeler out there on the desert and just watching them. Same thing when we wean. And when we wean, we're on the Crook County side, but it's also going to help out over there because a lot of it's not steep or anything, but kind of hilly landscape, but open. We've done a lot of sage grouse cutting, honestly. So we've removed a lot of the juniper there. So the drones are going to be very effective there as well.
Thank you.
Ryan, have you already had experience flying the drone at night?
Not currently. I did order a thermal drone because no matter what, we're going to use it. I have not received it yet though to play with it at night. So that'll be a little learning curve, but I got lots of wide open spaces to practice.
Yeah.
I had a question about the night vision. You know, with the I guess I kind of didn't understand why you would want night vision versus like just shooting a spotlight, because I feel like the spotlight would scare the wolves away if you're going to be close enough to see them with a night vision. So I guess that I kind of had a question about that and how you thought maybe that would be beneficial versus just using spotlights, which I understand they use batteries, and I don't know how long the goggles last versus a light, but anyhow,
Right.
that
No, my biggest thoughts are just, be nice to be able to see in the dark. That's when the wolves are going to be operating the most, is at nighttime. And
Sure.
the night vision goggles would be helpful on an ATV, I think. And also, honestly, you can have them on if you're driving the pickup and you can see out the window also. Just getting in and out of a lot of environments, I think it'd be helpful, but
Okay. The geo collars, I saw that was on there too. Do you guys have kind of thinking just putting that in the first calf heifers, or maybe that allotment you have closer to Prineville? Is that allotment still in Deschutes County, or is that one in Jefferson
that one's in Crook County.
or Crook County? Sorry.
Yeah. No, as far as the collars go, we just put down a couple hundred head, just in case we wanted to try to dip our toes in it, because I did a rough calculation on the entire herd. If you were to do the entire operation, we'd be close to $100,000 just doing that. And there's a lot of issues, or maybe not issues, but concerns with the collars. Just as far as service, we don't have a lot of service, so we don't know how many towers we would need. Some of our, like facilities as far as corrals and the logistics of changing out the batteries every 6 months and, all those type of issues, we'd have to do a lot more than just that on our end just to be able to do the collars too. So we just put down a small number there. I mean, it doesn't look small, but in reality, it's a small number.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think Ryan, sorry, I'm jumping in. I think I'm speaking for everyone. When we first got this application, and obviously speaking to you, you're clearly legit. But when we first got this application, I personally got a bit of sticker shock. So, oh, that's a fair ask.
Yeah. Well, and
yeah.
that's like Jen said, I called and talked to her because at the very beginning of this, we're like, we feel super guilty putting down any kind of a big number. But at the end of the day, people need to know what that number is. And to be fair, I think we could have made a bigger number if we wanted to, but I don't know that we necessarily needed to. We're not expecting to get a single dime out of any of this, to be honest. But these wolves, if we're gonna be expected to coexist with them, that's gonna cost money.
Makes sense.
And it's going to be a learning process. I think we all know that.
For sure.
Right.
And we appreciate the fact that as a rancher, I mean, you've got Honda motorcycles and horses and pickup trucks, and you got more equipment, on a ranch than, there's a lot of expense, a lot of investment. But I think from my point of view, I'm hoping that ranchers will try the simpler, less expensive things first, that are the basic, more obvious things. It's a little hard to spend money on towers and collars and
Mhm.
night vision goggles and all that until they're a little more tried and proven. And some of these are, and some of these aren't really. I think the Fox lights have proven to be fairly effective. I'm no expert, trust me. I've been around ranching a lot, but I
Yeah.
not with wolves. So
And
I'm
I'll
sympathetic to what you're going through, but on the other hand, I think we all need to take this slowly and learn as we go. And it'd be nice to get feedback too. I know the rancher A, let's call him, that we that had a depredation in 2023. I don't think we've ever heard back a word, have we, of how successful the preventive measures have been? And
I'll just speak up to that. I'm waiting. I haven't asked him for his report yet because I'm waiting on Sonny from the state to tell me what I need from him. So he will have to give us a report. I just don't have it yet.
yeah,
And because I have not requested it from him yet.
I guess my point is this has to be a partnership where we all work together. And Aaron, I think, is doing a yeoman's job, as much area as he has to cover. But we also have to recognize that he's not in a position to say no to anything that a rancher might want or suggest they'd like to have, because he needs to be your team, your partner in this whole thing, and you need to be able to call him and have him show up when he's needed. I think on our end, we have to watch the funding so that it spreads out fairly to to all the ranchers that have in our known wolf activity areas. And the fact is at this point we didn't have any depredations in Deschutes County. I actually do know of one by a rancher, and he didn't report it. He just called the vet and patched his calf up, and they mended it back up. But it wasn't a killing; it was just a wound. But in any case, I hope you'll be understanding too that I don't think there's an unlimited bucket of money, and that whatever bucket we have could be significantly reduced too, just given the times right now. But
yeah, we definitely understand all that. And I do want to mention on the Fox lights, I'm not going to say that they are ineffective, but I'm definitely skeptical of them.
okay,
And David could probably attest to this too, but we looking at collared wolf data of that 158 between us and the neighbor Hatfields, he went right through a couple of Fox lights and it didn't scare him away. And on a side note too, we've also been playing with just little AM FM radios and stuff like that and hanging them on the fence. And when 158 came back up from California, he came and went directly. David could probably give you more accurate, but I mean, he went and sniffed an AM FM radio that was hanging on the fence on our property. So you really want to succeed with this, in my mind, which we're all learning. I'm still learning. But as of right now, human presence is the only thing that's going to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the application that that McCormick Ranch has put forward, I see a lot of things, but these are all proven things. You know, we haven't gotten a report back from Rancher A, but but we also haven't had any more depredations from Rancher A. And bottom line, that is the ultimate data, right? That that ranch experienced a couple of confirmed depredations, a bunch of missing animals, and then this year no claims. So I mean, I think that means that it worked. Yeah, we don't know exactly which of the things that Rancher A did were the things that worked, but like the electric fence, that was one of the techniques that was used out there. We know that range riders are very effective, from many other parts of the state. So so I would look at this application and say, okay, this is a lot of things. McCormick Ranch is it's almost like McCormick Ranch is running a bunch of experiments. You know, like we know these are like 6 or 7 techniques that have worked in other places. We don't know yet which one is going to be most effective for us. So we want to try them. And I'm sympathetic to that kind of approach, right? Like these are this is the best practices. We would love to try all of them. And see what works in our setting, or even what works in this part of our ranch and what works on that part of our ranch, because it sounds like it's a pretty varied landscape in some ways. But yeah, so that would be one argument I could see for just sending it all up to flagpole and seeing what the state will support. um but we could also, in the interest of, not making too much demand of state resources, trying to be equitable across livestock producers in our region, we could also just, pick and choose from that menu, and submit a smaller, a smaller subset of things. It could go, we could go either of those directions. There's arguments both ways. Jen.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing about Rancher A, where Aaron Bod did give us an update on the rancher at the last meeting, kind of anecdotal. We didn't have any data, but he said he is still in touch with him on a very regular basis, and with his range rider, or his cowboy, I think that's what he calls him, out there. So he talks with him on a very regular basis, and Aaron was very positive to report that the preventative measures that he implemented were working, and were being successful out there. So just wanted to throw that in there. And then just one more time, again, as a reminder, we don't need to decide in this meeting specifically the grant funds that we receive on how they're going to be spended out. So again, that's going to be in the April meeting, potentially even later than that, depending what the committee wants to do with the Cook County. But this meeting is just to put forth applications. Once we receive the grant funds, and the committee can also talk in detail about how and who they distribute those funds to. So just, I know I've said that a few times, but I just wanted to reiterate that one more time.
And also
Question.
based on ratios, the ratios that you described earlier, Jen, it does kind of sound like if you want to get $30,000, and you have if you want to get $30,000, you put in $80,000 of legitimate request, and maybe you get $30,000. And then you get to decide what you're going to do with that in April.
On the dump trailer, not to twist the knife, but if David does lose his position, what happens to the dump trailer for the carcasses?
So that's what Ellie and I were briefly talking about. We had 14 minutes to cover a lot of ground today before I had hop on for this meeting. I think that is one of the things that's going to be reevaluated as potentially, I know Steve and Papa did some research on contractors. And Ellie also knows of a trailer, David, you might know, I think it's in Pride Mill. And that can be rented for $300 a week. So it might be better in funds to put, and if we get awarded funds for trailers, or the county wants to use funds that we were awarded to put towards a trailer, we'll probably reevaluate, or at least present new options and additional options on carcass removal programs in general.
Okay.
Also, Ellie, I think, is tracking another couple different programs. So everything we heard from Aaron and from David and from Ellie with her work with the Western Landowners Alliance is like carcass removals is huge. It should get funded to some extent. if the, you know, if the group agrees, but possibly actually buying a trailer, given the uncertain circumstances and times right now, might not be the most feasible, and it actually might pencil out better to look at alternative ways to implement the purpose program through data. So I think those are deeper or bigger conversations, you know, and granted, in a month or two, we may have further clarification, maybe not, but we may have further clarification on wildlife services. So there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, just in general right now going on with any sort of funding. So yeah, solid question. I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry that all my non-answers are really long-winded tonight, but you know, just a lot to piece together. But again, I think the important thing for this call is to determine just the grant funds that we're putting forward, and I'll probably keep the application as it was voted on in the last meeting. But once those funds come in, you know, the committee can talk about all the options on the table for how to best implement the use of the funds that it receives.
And if we apply for the funds for the specific trailer, they can be used other ways too, right?
All of these funds can be used in any
However.
non-preventative measure way.
Okay.
Yep,
And we'll decide that in May.
April or May, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, that's something too that we can talk about at a different meeting. I want to keep it interest in time. I'm sorry. I never schedule enough time for these meetings. But I think also get further clarification if, you know, what the possibility of pooling those funds with Cook County is and kind of using it together or separately. Again, that's all things that the committee can decide, but I'm going to try to have more information and options for you when we come back in April. You know, about what is available to do with those funds, and once we receive word how much we're getting to.
Okay.
So the application already, Jen, what was the amount that you put in? Sorry, I missed the last
I
meeting.
haven't put it in yet. I'm waiting, but yeah, Ethan, I apologize. You weren't at the last meeting. The group decided to ask for $30,000 in funding on behalf of the county. Those funds are $15,000 towards a carcass removal program, $10,000 towards buying a trailer, and then $5,000 towards box lights.
Okay.
We did.
So what we're trying to decide today then, sorry if I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Are we adding, we're trying to add to that with
So the
these,
total would be one, I put it in an email because my math has been particularly bad lately. The total would be
102 or something? Yeah.
So no, higher than that. So 18,
Oh, yeah.
let's say
We got 30.
97,102, 132.8. If
Yeah.
my very quick math was
Yeah.
correct there.
Okay.
If all applications were approved to move forward as is, and then that's also pending board approval as well.
Okay. So in essence, today's meeting is, are we going to apply for that much money? Really?
Yeah. So the committee, as it stands, you guys can change it, but as it stands, the committee has already voted to apply for $30,000 in preventative measure funds. And then there's an additional 102,800 on the table in request from grant applications. So those are from the 3 ranches: McCormick Ranch, Upland Highland Trust, and Desert Creek Land Cattle.
Yep. And then the actual, depending on what we get, we can divvy up however.
Yep.
Yep.
Any which way.
Yep.
Yeah, not beholden to.
Yep.
The only beholding funds are, you know, when it's actually depredation or missing goes directly or through us, but directly to producer. But the preventative measure funds, once we know what those grants are, then the committee can bring in Ryan if he's willing to come in again, or whoever, and have a discussion on what the best use of the funds that we were actually granted should go towards for the year.
Yeah, would you be all right to do that, Ryan? Come in another meeting, stick your head in?
Yeah, I have no problem.
Because it's, as they've kind of talked about, it has been a bit of a black hole, not knowing where things have gone, and having an actual rancher on the ground kind of giving us feedback would be fantastic. And I know, like, giving funds, it's kind of like we don't want to dictate how you run your operations by like you can spend money on this and you can't spend money on that. It's kind of every operation is different, but we are kind of, as Gordon said, responsible. We need to be responsible at the same time. So it's kind of a fine tightrope of, yeah, you can do this, but you can't do that, but it's your operation kind of thing. So apologies if that's the way it's coming across. We're just walking a tightrope.
Yeah, no, that's all understood, and I have no issues debating anything you guys want to.
So
It's all a discussion.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming in, Ryan. It's very helpful to get an actual rancher talking to us and finding out, what is going on the ground. But that said, we haven't had any depredations in Deschutes County.
That you've known about.
Since Ashanti's. Well, yeah, well, I know of one injury, but on the other hand, it just doesn't seem responsible for us to ask for a fairly large amount of money when there's other counties that are getting lots of depredations, and Wallowa County, Union County, others. Yeah, so I think we ought to be a little more careful about our ask personally until we have seen some depredations or we know that the problem is not getting taken care of by just more experience and better management of the herds and the cattle and where they're how they're trying to coexist. And sounds like you run a very responsible operation. I know the Hyde Ranch very well down on the Williamson River. And I think that's probably Becky's mother and father-in-law that started that ranch. They're the ones that were closer in age to me. But
That are out here with us, yeah.
Yeah.
It was Doc and Connie, yeah.
Yeah. So I know they've had a wolf down there once too. But I just think we ought to be pretty careful personally about just asking for over $100,000 when we had no depredations. I just don't think that's responsible personally.
I do think one thing to keep in mind is the whole goal of this whole thing is to prevent depredations.
And the question is, how best do we do that? I think that's just an uncertain thing right now. We're all learning. And that's why I think it's so important that as a rancher, you'll help us figure this out. And I wish that Rancher A would also be, do the responsible thing and come back and talk to us, or we could learn, how come he hasn't had any more depredations? If, we don't really know. And it's hard to make decisions when you don't have information. And that's what we need most of all. And also, when ranchers are asking for things, it'd be very helpful if we had, like you said, it's about 50-50 where your land is. But we didn't know that until just tonight when you came on. We didn't know if you had 5 acres in Deschutes County or 50,000 acres.
Yeah, and just another thing on that same note, as far as 50-50, that might be something to look at in the future. But also, I was thinking about it, and I 100% every single day of the year I have cows on Deschutes County, and every single day of the year I have cows on Crook County too. So
yeah,
you could think of it that way too. I don't know if that helps anything or not, but we're always in both counties at the same time, year round.
Where is your most risk? Is it in the calving pens in the late winter, early spring of the year, or you say you have also you do calving in the fall as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's year round on that point, but yeah, my biggest concern is during calving, which, like I said, we have spring calvers and fall calvers, so that kind of just makes it year round work. And then also when we wean, those are my 2 biggest priorities, because you're literally just throwing out distress calls. And that's when we really started having issues, was kind of around that weaning and then throughout the winter. And then you say too that we haven't had a whole lot of depredations or any in Deschutes County this year. but I think we got lucky. We had confirmed on a game camera a pack of 4 and 2 other individuals for sure. So at least 6 different wolves, and they all were, that game camera was within 1 mile of the one herd of cows that's got cows and calves out there on the desert. It was probably about 3/4 of a mile away from their water trough.
Mhm.
So, and those wolf tracks, they were at the water trough too. They were in the cows. David, he can tell you that too. They were in the middle of the herd. They just happened to not kill anything that we discovered. So we're already having conflict. We just, to get a confirmed depredation, we hope that doesn't happen. So my personal goal is to just increase human presence on the landscape at the right times of year, which who knows when that is, to be honest.
I agree with that. As a prior veterinarian, I totally believe in prevention. But at the same time, a little bit what Gordon says, as a veterinarian, I wouldn't really want to use what's termed a shotgun approach, where everything's used at once on an animal, like hitting an animal with 20 different antibiotics when one would work. So I sort of look at this. I personally think that the range riders give the best bang for the buck in a way, especially on large acreage. I don't see how, game cameras are going to help that much, because by the time they're picked up, unless they're working off satellite, by the time you get out there, you won't see them. You're a day late or a couple hours late, and some of the others. But range rider, the human presence 24/7 certainly makes sense. But some of the other asks for the towers and things that have to be moved around, the topography and the expense of keeping that system up. I just think if I were to choose, I would really concentrate on range riding. That would be my approach. The other thing too, I know most of these wolves, as Aaron told us, are dispersing. They're using that corridor. I don't think you're near an aqua, area of known wolf activity, and I don't think you have an actual pack yet. But maybe the wolves will move on and come over here. Maybe move up to Jefferson County. We don't know. But I think the concentration, for me personally, should be on range riding. Most of the money for that.
Right. So we have had a lot of good discussion. I'm sure more to be had, but we thought this was going to be the short meeting. That's why we did it by Zoom. I'm thinking that maybe we have had enough discussion, kind of like enough of the sense of the application philosophy, like ask for everything you want to try, so that we can learn, versus, be more narrowly focused, to kind of honor how much wolf activity there is around the state, and not to ask for too much from a county where we did not have a depredation last year. So, we've sort of talked about the philosophy. We've talked a little bit about the tools, essentially the different prevention tools. I'm wondering if anyone is at this point ready to kind of make a motion on this one of 3 applications. Say, I think we should ask for this much money for these pieces. And then we can see if that motion passes, or whether people want to refine that list, add, subtract, modify in other ways to kind of start to move towards a decision point.
And I'm just gonna make one more point in this, in that there is not a requirement by ODA or this program that when we grant ranchers or producers their funds, that they have to spend it the way the committee spends it. They get to choose how to use those funds for their preventative measures, and that umbrella is big. And that is the guidance that we have given out along, and that is the guidance that's coming from ODA. So I just wanted to preface that it's not in our charter nor ODA's requirement that we tell ranchers how to use their funds. They get funds for preventative measures. They get a pool of funds for preventative measures. And they are able to use those in any way that's available. I think part of that was set up so that it can be an adaptable situation as it's fluid on the ground about what's happening and what's working and what's not working and all of that. So I just wanted to put that clarification out there as well. Now,
Thank
you can, we asked them to put specific things down in the grant application, so there's some justification for the funds being used.
Right.
And we can say, we're giving you funds for this, but the other, we're giving you $50,000 for colors. But as the guidance I provided last year and the guidance I get provided by ODA and the guidance I will continue to be provided is that any preventative measures is applicable for these funds that use. And that's how the grants are written as well. The grant agreement that the county has to the rancher when the funds change hands.
So as a committee, can we lessen the funds that they're applying for on their grant? Like, if we're applying for 100,000 and we want to shave, say 30,000 off of that, is that something we can even do, or because they're applying for the grant, that's the number?
Very good question, actually.
I mean, if it's their grant and they're applying,
Questions on it, yeah. Are we just literally the pass-through? I mean, I think that the answer is yes, we can, because we are the pass-through agency, the county. Because the county commissioners could also decide not to apply for all the funds or any of the funds. So I've assumed that there's some leeway there, but maybe that was a bad assumption on my end. But there is, I mean, for the county can for sure, so I would assume that the committee can. And the reason why the county can is because we're the grant recipient in the end. Because it's a
Got it.
Yeah, I mean,
pleasure to you.
in the the way it's supposed to work is that the County Board of Commissioners respects the recommendation of the committee and does what the committee tells us to do. So,
Okay.
From
But-
the sounds, yeah, go for it.
I think Johnny's question is more to the point of like that, but also like, is it the committee's role to say you can't ask for that much from a producer?
Right, that's where
That's a good question.
that's exactly it.
I'm looking up the rules real quick to see. I haven't seen anything one way or the other. On that. I'm guessing if I had to be honest from my other conversations, I'm guessing that this is not come up in any of the other grant.
and Jen, I guess, one other question is, do we submit this in 4 pieces? Or do we just submit all of it?
I just submit, I would submit, yeah, I just send Sunny an email. It's so different than any other grant application. There's no portal or anything like that. I'll just send an email to Sunny with all 4 grant applications.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess the question now is, do we, or, I mean, if we don't play a role in kind of modifying the applications from the producers, is the question then, does the committee approve forwarding the application or not?
Yeah,
I've taken a little bit different approach. I went through all the applications
ask by ask, a line item. And I came up with a total of all three of $30,000. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a start. And I'd say if we asked for somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60, in addition to what we already voted on, that's going to come up right about close to $100,000 total. I'm just not comfortable asking for any more than that right now. And then I think we also need to make sure that these ranchers are helping us in a partnership role, including Rancher A, and so we can get more information back and get continue these partnership discussions. I think that's vital if we're going to be at all responsible in giving out this money.
I will say that is not a requirement of the grant. I think for some of your concerns, Gordon, I will need to go back to ODA. I'm not sure if that is not within the charter establishment of the Wolf Committee, nor of the ODA ORS code. The requirement and the written requirement of the grant agreement between the county and the rancher is that they provide a report on how they use the funds. They're not required to further interact with the Wolf Committee. They're not required to further provide information outside of those parameters. And as I made clear to the ranchers today, they weren't even required to come onto this meeting, and we appreciate very much so that Ryan is here and has spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks, during really hectic season for to come and be a part of this committee and give feedback, but that is not a requirement. I'm just reading real quick. I think that's a very good question that Johnny flagged of like, does the committee have the role in saying that we're not gonna put forward an application in its entirety from a rancher? I feel pretty confident that question's never come up from other Wolf committees. Like I said, even Ellie, all she requires is send an email and say, what do you want and how much? Like, they don't have to fill out the application. So the requirements of the Deschutes County Wolf Committee is the most stringent of the requirements of any application process in the state of the counties, to the best of my knowledge. But I will, if the decision of this committee coming out of this is not to put forward the grant applications from the ranchers as they were submitted, I will reach out to Sunny tomorrow to make sure that that is applicable.
I think we would need to take a vote on that. And Gordon, I just want to, I want to check to make sure you understand what we ask for, we will get a fraction of that. Like, so if we ask for $100,000, we're not getting $100,000. I can absolutely guarantee you that. Like, we'll be lucky if we get 30 or 40. So if you think that the actual valid need is 30 or 40, then asking for 100 is actually the right thing to do.
And that's what I just said. Yeah, that I would be comfortable doing that.
Okay.
Asking for twice as much as I think would be fair and reasonable in this case. One rancher asks for 81,000, another rancher asks for 5,000, and we don't know really what the real need is of either of those ranchers. One could be exaggerating, one could not be asking for nearly enough to really make a difference. So we're really
Background on the 5,000. I talked extensively with that woman while she was dropping her kid off at school. She had just found out about the application. She got it into me like 2 hours before the deadline. She was dealing with toxicity with her cattle, and her cattle were dying. And like, she was trying to get that in.
Yeah.
The deadline of the committee, and having.
I suspected that was the case. Yeah.
On last Tuesday, in the middle of that massive snowstorm that was going on, that was when the deadline was. And so there was a lot going on, and the fact that she was even able to get an application in. She apologized profusely about the state of the application even. I was like, please don't. So there's just a lot of background information. I think, to take 2 hours out of a rancher's time on an evening is a lot. There's a lot going on right now with the weather and just the workload that they have. So
Sure.
I see Ryan's hand is up, but I just want to provide some context. I've spoken to all three of these applicants on the phone. They all called me, and we're really, really trying to work and provide the information of the Wolf Committee while managing a lot of other things going on.
Well, we're all learning, and it's not a perfect system by any means, but I do think we've got to be judicious with handing out, taxpayers' money without a little bit better information. So we're learning, the ranchers are learning. It's going to take a bit of a partnership to get there.
And understand your perspective. I think we've heard it, Gordon. Thank you. Ryan, did you want to say something more?
Yeah, I just I was just kind of thinking about his magical number of $100,000 being a cap for an ask. Just as far as a reality perspective, how we were talking about range riders and how I said I could put 7 to use easily. And honestly, I could probably double that number because you'd probably want 24-hour shifts. So that's at least 2 long 12-hour. Anyways, at $25 an hour for 7 riders year round, you're talking about $364,000. I just want to put, there are way, way bigger numbers out there.
Sure, I understand. Yeah.
So I'm just curious why out of the thin air, you're like, oh, $100,000 seems like a lot.
Well, until we know what works and we have no information back from the first rancher we gave money to, we don't know what worked and what didn't. We just know he hasn't had any more depredations.
So it's
And
working.
well, maybe. And maybe he's changed his operation. We don't know. We don't even know if he's still ranching. Literally, I don't think we've heard anything back from him that I know of.
If I can just time us out here. So we can have concerns about our interactions with one rancher, and I would those inform the way we interact with others, but like I would caution us against holding that against others.
Oh no, I'm not holding it against, but we have a responsibility to try to follow up, I think, and find out what's worked and what hasn't.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I guess I would say we're not gonna know what works or what doesn't work unless we try things. So, I mean, we have to provide people with resources if we want them to try things.
And we have to get feedback.
Yes, and I getting the impression that that Ryan is willing to partner with us through this process. If there are funds that come out of this process, he's willing to partner with us to share learning that he accomplishes on his ranch.
Is that a yes, Ryan? Are you okay to kind of give us some feedback in the future, just to kind of help set our minds at ease?
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to come back and get grilled by your guys' questions. It's all good for everybody. It's only going to improve the way things move forward. So
Yeah.
I mean, this is a new committee and we are trying to do our job and, advance prevention work. So we would be very, as much as you're getting grilled, I mean, that it is with the intent, I think that it is with the goal of learning how we can do prevention well in this region. And then, so thank you again so much for being willing to spend the time with us, walk us through your operations and your ranch in detail so that we can see how these different prevention tools might play or not play there.
yep, for sure. And there's definitely no hard feelings on my end. I totally understand all of it, but I do want to paint that reality that there's way, way bigger numbers than any of this out there. If you truly want to coexist with these things, and the goal at the end of the day is to have 0 depredations.
Yeah.
If all that's considered, just like I said, if you really do want to just, we know range riding works, correct? And I just threw you out a big number on what it would take to cover our operation 24/7. I think that's a reasonable number. So if you want, I can go back through our grant application and bump that number up.
I personally like just knowing that we're trying to head towards a motion here. I'm leaning to kind of the way Johnny's thinking is we don't is it really in our purview to say yay or nay to someone's application? Our kind of role will kind of come in, I think, when we actually get some funds in and say, all right, this is how much we actually can give you realistically. Right now, it's all kind of numbers from thin air because we don't actually have any money up our sleeve to distribute. So from my perspective, the fair thing to do is to stick with what has been requested because that's like a straight from the horse's mouth, from a lack of a better term. And then the commissioners can have their say, and then whatever monies we actually get distributed to us, then we can start having these kind of discussions about, all right, who gets what a bit more. Right now, we're kind of inserting ourselves, and this is just my opinion, we're inserting ourselves a little too early into the application process. And I get that we have the right to do that in theory, but it's not real money at this point. And I get that we have a responsibility, and we also have a reputation that we need to kind of be aware of if we're going in and asking for huge amounts of money and every year and then oh, it's Deschutes County, they're always after $250,000 or something like that, and they don't need it. So I get that argument as well, but we're literally at this stage in my mind, we're just the conduit to the actual people on the ground and what they're requesting, and then later on we can. That's my opinion at this point. So I don't know if there's a motion there of Gordon, if you want to retort, or if Ryan wants to take a haircut on his ask of money, that's up to you guys.
I guess, Ethan, that wasn't phrased as a motion, but if you'd like it to be a motion, we can do that.
It wasn't a motion because I don't know where half the rest of the board stands just yet, and we can vote. I don't know.
Could we? I mean, it would be great. We've heard from all of the committee members except Stephen.
I had a question, but I mean, we're probably beyond all that now, but for the next meeting, is there any consideration among the producers for management practices to coexist more likely? Like small, you said you're calving on the whole allotments out in the field. Can it be managed differently, and would it help? And then weaning, again, that's what's there and what's available, but where can things be moved to? So is it worthwhile to start talking about some different management practices than have been done before to look at lessening the impacts? But again, that would be a discussion for later.
Yeah, I can certainly put that as a future topic to bring in. I think in the past we've had guests come in or been invited in to present, so that could be a topic for one of our committee meetings going forward on an educational thing on different management practices. If I'm hearing you correctly, Stephen.
I think that could probably be a pretty long discussion too. I mean, that our country natural beef ranchers, they are already doing things differently than, the kind of the standard. I mean, Ryan talked about the very large number of pastures and that they're operating over, and I'm sure that there's a lot of movement of animals between those pastures, and that is probably rooted in certain kinds of stewardship principles, which then you could very well make it more challenging to deal with wolves than a standard operation. But yeah, if it's okay, I think we defer that conversation to the next meeting. But Stephen, do you have any input on what we should or shouldn't be submitting in an application?
Well, that's still the question is, can we alter what's in an application?
Right.
And, it certainly seems like it's applying for a little bit of everything all over the place, which may be problematic showing up to a state agency that way.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure that we can alter it.
Right, right. Well, it
I
sounds
think
like
it'd be reasonable to try and just send it in and see what happens.
okay. So I've heard, I think I've heard at least two scenarios now. One is if we are allowed to tinker with the applicants, the producer applicants, applications, or say we're willing to submit this much of it. Gordon put out this 100,000 number. Um, another scenario was just send everything in that we received. So those are at least two options. Do people have any other options besides those? Is there a third or a fourth scenario? It's- if not, then I think it's just a question of whether who wants to move one of those options first. Because the Robert's Rules of Order, basically, you make a motion and then we run that one to the ground to a vote before you can consider another motion.
Okay, I'll move that we increase our ask to $100,000 total.
If we are allowed to not submit what was submitted to us.
I don't understand why we would have to, as our overall ask, which includes other things as well, have to include the three in their exact number. But maybe I'm not understanding the process well.
I would need further clarification on that motion specifically, since we have I think it's 132,800, if my really quick math was right, worth of grant applications on the table. I would need to know specifically what grant application or what numbers. Because I would just, as is, I would just submit the applications that have been given to me. So if I am needing to say that we're not asking for that amount, I need somebody or people to adjust their grant applications.
So
Can I
Jen,
jump
that's the contingency on this motion. If we are allowed to tinker with applications, then the motion says we're submitting for 100,000. If we're not, then
Right, but
it's
I
all
would need to go back and tell who what money they could or could not ask for. I need to arrive at the 100,000.
right. But
Or I would need to say X branch needs to amend their application to ask for X amount of grant dollars less.
But does it
No.
really matter? Because if whatever amount of funding is awarded, we get to kind of pick and choose the way that that's going to be allocated out anyway.
Right.
Could you just say, all right, we got 3 applications for 97,000 and we'll add 3,000 more, just for the committee.
Well, so our 3 applications are at 102.8. So we could, to make it clean, you could say that your grant application is going to be for 102.8, and I could just submit the 3 that we have. But I don't think that's the intent. I am not understanding that to be the intent of Gordon's motion.
Can I jump in real quick and just throw it back to Ryan? Because this is, I think, if I'm reading between the lines here, Gordon, it's the 81 is kind of the sticky point. Ryan, do you have any things that you would be willing to match with Gordon's desire, or you pretty hard line on what you're asking for?
I
And
don't know.
You can be. I'm just trying to get your opinion on what you want for your
Well, and
representative.
for the most part, our understanding of this whole process is kind of a wish list, if you will. And obviously I wrote it down on a piece of paper, so I don't think it is just out of the question. I mean, not thinking the right word. But I think it's all somewhat reasonable in my mind. That's why I put it down there. And like I said, I could definitely bump that number up. And I don't think it would be unreasonable too. Because if you're talking about strictly range riding, like I said, way over $250,000. And I think that's a ridiculous number, but what is realistic? We don't know. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I know all of you guys kind of look at it and you're like, ooh, night vision goggles, that seems silly. But okay, yeah, let's just divert that money and put it into more human presence. We can still use that money.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of double check that you
Yeah,
were pretty,
no,
pretty straightforward on your. Yep.
I understand, but yeah, I would definitely stick to my number, and I could, like I said, I could definitely go up more.
Okay.
But
I just come back to, we had 0 predations in Deschutes County, and I think we need to see more evidence that we need to spend this kind of money to prevent depredations. And if we can spend it more wisely, a little less technology and a little more common sense and good ranching techniques and management, as Stephen pointed out, perhaps some adaptations by the ranchers to coexist better. I think it has to be a work in progress. That's why I'm just not comfortable jumping into large numbers without any depredations.
Okay, Gordon, so you've made that clear, your perspective clear. You've made, I mean, you've made a motion. Now we're gonna see if there's a second to the motion. If there's a second, then we can have some more discussion. We could maybe let David speak because he's got his hand up about this. And then we could proceed to a vote. If there's not a second, then the motion
Dies.
yeah, dies. And we go to another motion.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Is there more discussion? David, did you want to?
Yeah, I don't want to drag this on any more than it has to, but just out of curiosity, and maybe Jen, is there an average that producers typically ask for, say in Crook County, since they've had this program for a long time? I know that it changes depending on the rancher and their operation and what kind of prevention methods they want to employ. But is there any kind of previous number that is good to go off of that? It just sounds like there's a lot of confusion right now with what people should be asking for. And I totally understand from Ryan's perspective that there's so many different tools that you can use for non-lethal wolf conflict prevention, and they all work in their own right. And it's really hard to know which one is going to be the best one to use. But is there some kind of previous amount that's worked for other producers or anything you could go off of that might help to ease what is a acceptable amount to request?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers from last year. I'm trying to find it really quick when I'm talking to you guys. I have the numbers. I think the most recent one was like 2019 or 2020. And then that was only just what each county asked for. So it didn't show the applications. So I don't want to delay this. So I will, if there's further discussion, I'm going to look into this as I'm talking to you and try to pull up that previous. I definitely don't have it from 2024 but I think I have some numbers from some previous ones.
I was also kind of thinking that, it's a big number, but it's also a very large operation. Um, for one, so, the number may seem big, but he's also covering a lot of ground. Two, he's probably not going to ask for this much next year, so this might be a one-time push. Ryan, maybe you can weigh in on that. I mean, do you guys plan to ask for this much next year too?
No, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head like that. We're jumping full bore into a lake right now. We need a boat, we need swim trunks, you need all of it right off the get-go. And I don't expect to get a single dime, like I said, out of it. But another thought too is, if I remember correctly, last year you had one producer involved in this and he asked for roughly 50 grand. Is that correct or close? Just ballpark?
Yeah.
40 something?
I can pull that
Sounds
up.
about right.
Like,
So just for simple math, because I'm a simple-minded person, now you have 3 producers. Why does 150,000 not seem reasonable? I mean, I'm just having a hard time with this magical $100,000 cap. And like Johnny just mentioned too, we're not all running equal acres, equal cows.
Yeah.
I have a hard time
I
with.
see the
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I see the drone being really beneficial for you guys because the drone
Johnny,
can cover
did
a
you
lot
want
more
to say
ground.
something?
Oh, am I gone or am I still there?
I can hear you.
Oh, not sure. Can you hear me now, Phil?
I can hear you just fine, Johnny.
Okay. Yeah, I see the drone being, it seems like a silly idea, but man, they could cover a lot of ground quickly with a
Jen,
drone.
could you tell us what Johnny said?
Yeah, he's saying, okay, hold on. He just said he can, the drone's a lot of money, but they can cover a lot of ground really quickly. He wasn't done in thought yet, though. Keep going, Johnny.
Oh, it just, it made a lot of sense. And, everything that they're asking for, maybe I had questions about the night vision and the towers because I wasn't, it was more just questions. I didn't really know how they were going to be used. I'm maybe not doubting what you're asking for, just curious.
Okay, so pause there, because he said also, originally he had some questions about the towers and what was the other one, Johnny?
Night vision goggles.
Night vision goggles. Not that he was doubting it, he just had questions about it and he wanted to get more information about it, but he did that from Ryan providing information. So it wasn't, his questions weren't intended to provoke doubt about Ryan's application. It was more for information purposes. Did you have other thoughts, Johnny?
Not at the moment.
Apparently I'm your interpreter. Okay.
Thank you.
That's all of Johnny's thoughts. And then I did look at the application from last year and the producer requested $45,000.
And he got 20,000, I think, and part of that was for the vent system and some for range riding. And if those two supposedly help decrease depredation, that worked. He apparently didn't need the whole fire hose of everything that we know of. We're based on what he was going to use that money for. So in his situation, those two things apparently worked, we guess.
Okay. Is there any more discussion before we vote on the motion? Right. Well, I'll call for the vote then. All those, oh boy, there's 6 of us. Okay. Boy, it'd be really nice if Sarah Lee was here. All those in favor? Got 1 vote. I got 2. Okay. All those opposed?
I,
Was that you, Stephen?
yes,
Okay. So 2 to 4. So we will set that motion down. And does anyone want to make another motion?
Whether I should jump in with the next one because I talked about it. And again, I just think it's the wrong time to start picking and choosing what we should spend money on. And I think that we're just a conduit at this point for applications. That's why I'll make the motion to just submit the current standing applications as they are to the county commissioners.
Second.
Okay. More discussion? We've talked this through pretty thoroughly. Okay. Going to the vote, all those in favor?
I,
I
Um, opposed? Okay, well, motion carries 4-2. Yeah, I'm sorry that we had division around this. I do think that we will have the opportunity after we run our applications up the flagpole, and some small amount of money comes back, we will have the opportunity to do some, you know, have some more discussion about what the highest priority and most strategic ways to allocate out the funds that do come back will be. And I'm sure we're going to continue discussing some of the issues that we raised today. So with that, is there anything else for the good of the order from any committee members or anyone else?
Can I just ask Ryan? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of discussion at the next meeting when the funds do come in. And unfortunately, just thinking realistically, you're probably going to have to pick and choose what you want out of your list. Are you able to, in the meantime, before that meeting, kind of come in with some pretty straight numbers and like a plan, I suppose, because that'll really help your application and in the committee's mind, I suppose, to give you as much as we can and be fair to the other people as well. But if you come in with like a bit more of a nuts and bolts and are convincing, I suppose, not that we're after just lawyer talk, but I think that will help your application in and actually receiving more of the funds in the future. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if you honestly, if you guys had specific questions, it'd be almost nice to just write those out, because I kind of tried to write things in order of priority.
Okay.
And so like basically my biggest priority is just being out on the landscape. Kind of like I mentioned during those two, for starters, those two weaning and calving are the biggest priorities. And as far as, the drone, the night vision, those are tools that will help me while I'm out there. Because I don't have access to the GPS callers data, which that's only so helpful anyways, because it's usually at least 6 hours behind. Like David right now, he can listen to telemetry. I'm not allowed to access that information. So just having tools that can make you productive. So in my mind, like a thermal drone, you can send that up into the air, get a quick understanding of what's going on. If you do see a wolf, hopefully you have battery life and you can chase it off. And maybe that's enough. If not, you get on the quad, the ATV, and you chase after it, making a lot of noise, hooping and hollering. That's kind of my, I guess, progression down the list. The tools themselves just help the human presence on the ground be more successful.
Sure. But yeah, you are interested in coming to the next meeting though?
Yeah, for sure. If we can make it work, I'll definitely
Sure.
try.
Thanks, man.
And also maybe we could commit to, there'll come a point where we're notified how much funding we're getting. And maybe we can give, what would be a reasonable amount of of time, like notice, to tell, all of the applicants how much we got, so that they can think about what portion of that they want to ask for and for what. Couple weeks.
You asking me or are you asking Ryan, like how much notification the ranchers need?
I think I'm asking everybody.
Okay.
Well, I mean, Ryan, your perspective would be helpful, but I mean, committee members would have some perspective on this as well.
I would think a week or two, you could kind of look things over and evaluate, I guess. But yeah, there's no point in arguing a whole lot more about it at this point in my mind, because you don't even know that you're going to get a single penny. So
Right.
I think we'll get some, but I think it's also a lot easier for us to for us to say, hey, we got $80,000. Think about what portion of that you want to ask for and for what, than it is for us to say, hey, we got $30,000. Think about
Mhm.
what portion of that you want to ask for and for what. So yeah, if maybe we can give you essentially a 2-week window after notification, before we. So like Jen, maybe we can just sequence that. We have a anticipated date of award notification, and then a couple weeks after that, we get the committee together.
Yeah, it just had it pulled up. It is, March 31st is when they anticipate. Last week it ran a couple weeks late, but end of March, beginning of April. So probably looking mid-April for meetings.
Okay. Maybe before we pin down a date, you could just double check with Sunny. Does that look like it's a real date for
It
notification?
got bumped in the middle of it because she, just for personal time, work commitments. So I'll definitely check in with her. The other thing I wanted to check in with this committee about real quick, I'm really aware of the time, so sorry about that. Is there interest potentially before we do that grant allocation meeting in trying to coordinate a meeting with the Crook County Wolf Committee to see if there's interest in coordination? This will be after Ellie and I talk again, and we talk with Sunny to see if that's even an avenue to go down, but I don't think that we would have time to do both of those in one meeting, just given the nature of our discussions.
I think there's definitely value in understanding what they're doing. Maybe you could have Ellie come, just zoom in and share with us what's going on with the Crook County Committee. At minimum, if not you getting more information from them in advance.
Yeah, I think the question, again, we just talked about this quickly, but considering the update that we heard about wildlife services of like, is it more judicial for the two counties to combine resources and potentially grant fundings to shared ranchers and or preventative measures of what services David can provide? Having that discussion before we get the grant award, or maybe having that discussion once we get the grant award, and then another, a lot of things on the table there, but
it seems like, if you look at all of the applications that are going in, the amount that has a nexus with wildlife services it's not the majority of the dollars. Thoughts from other committee members?
I just want to put it out there, with no requirements. We can just keep our next grant or committee meeting to be grant allocation dollars if we want to keep kind of things separate between Deschutes County and Frick County.
I guess find out if we can first, and then, I mean, obviously, if we can, then it would make sense, especially with one of the biggest producers that's asking for the most money right now. It would kind of make sense to join teams if that's allowed.
And again, like maybe at least at minimum having Ellie asking Ellie to join us and you could represent us at their meeting or something like that.
Okay. I'll look into the few questions that Johnny has wisely posed in this meeting.
Okay.
And I can answer those. I can send that out via email. I will BCC the email because I can't have a situation where we do a reply all because then we get into the public meeting stuff, but I can send out the information to you all on the questions. We just can't continue a discussion via email with those questions. Thank you.
That's good. I didn't call for public comment either. Is there any public comment? Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you all so much for, we talk about some really important stuff and highlight, important tensions and trade-offs and differences in philosophy and strategy and all kinds of things at these meetings. Thank you all so much for making that happen. I think we make good decisions, better decisions, and and are hopefully going to have a bigger impact because of that. So thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
All
Good night.
right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.